also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're gathered, and elders who are here today. Yes, I am going to change tack a little bit. I'm going to move away from the art to one of the things that I think is always the elephant in the room at these gigs, and that is the money, and the models, and the issue about our organisations. And I want to pick up on a point that Stephen made this morning in what I thought was a great introduction, thank you Stephen, about emerging artists. When you said that business is about emerging artists, why we carry on funding emerging artists if we don't have jobs for them to go to. So the new models, new money research I'll come on to, but that's my starting point. Because, look, I think there's been some amazing shifts in artistic practice over the last few years, and just listening to your words and listening to this morning begins to express some of those. But as a sector, I would suggest we have a problem. We are not resilient to the future and what the future holds. I think from a funding and organisational point of view, our models have been tweaked, but not fundamentally changed. We're still high levels of dependence on single sources of funding across the sector, whether you're large or whether you're small. And the requirements for that funding have become more of a burden on the organisation as they're tied to specific programmes and outcomes. We're part of the problem. We just try to do more with less because we're so passionate about our mission and what we're trying to achieve, we just can't stop doing it. So my feeling about innovation, about change, is that more often than not, we have adapted to change. We are not the agents of change. And this really worries me, because that's why I got involved in the arts in the first place. I thought we were here to change the world, and I still do. I'm not saying that any of what I've talked about is right or wrong, it's just fact. And I just ask, how are we going to cope with the bigger global changes that are on their way? Unsustainable economic growth, resource scarcities in terms of food, etc., and of course the one that we're already dealing with, climate change. But as soon as we start talking about organisational change and funding change and money change, and innovation in that space, which innovation, another definition, signifies a substantial positive change compared to incremental change. Let's be open about the fears that we've got talking about this. Number one, that it's all about reducing government funding and getting government out of its role in investing in art and culture. No, wrong. Our aim must be to increase support across a number of different dimensions, including government. Number two, that it's somehow going to impact on our artistic direction and creation of work and what we really want to do. No, this must be about creating models which allow more freedom to go in the direction of artists and arts organisations to say the things that we want to say, to make good theatre, tell amazing stories, and share that with the greatest number of people possible. Three, everyone feels under attack. The funding system by the sector by the system. Now, we're in this together, all of us. And the research I've been involved in recently has led me to come back to a problem I've always thought. We have got to get an approach which empowers us as individual creative practitioners, as organisations, where we have more control over our structures and ways of working, and we build the right support around them to do that. In terms of who we are, I think we have to begin to use our skills as storytellers, not as statisticians, to tell what we're doing. We need to become much more savvy around articulating the benefits of investment in the actual creation, presentation, and conservation of art, as distinct from just paying for the social and economic benefits from that art. Not be forced just down the track of measuring the impact, but we tell the story of that impact. The stories where individuals and communities believe their world has changed for the better. That's the bit we hold on to during the change process. Our ability to help us all understand the human condition. That's what we're about. We change how we behave. We reclaim the title and the meaning of the word entrepreneur for ourselves and become as enterprising in our business as we are in creating our work. And what I would term cultural enterprises, not social enterprises, not creative enterprises, but cultural enterprises. We don't throw away or alter our mission and purpose to fulfill others' agendas. We strengthen our organisations and ourselves to deliver. We don't copy what happens in the rest of the commercial, government or non-profit sectors. We adapt it to make sense of it, develop and devise new business models that work for our goals. And then there's the money, the building the right resource framework around us to do what we want to do. We have to look at the current financing of the system because we are all the product and part of a bigger funding system that needs to change itself. We need to work together to determine how this can happen. And if there is any new money out there, we need to use it differently. Because just throwing an extra few $1 million at one leg of that wobbly three-legged stool just to support us a little bit more is not going to make it work anymore. We're going to yet again argue between ourselves which bit of the wobbly stool should be funded and should be held up this time. And yes, we'll be very good, we'll be very grateful, and we'll do wonderful things with the money, but will have anything fundamentally changed? I think what the system needs is less support to more and more programs, and a move to building the capital base of all our organisations, because it is in exploiting our assets in all shapes and forms, IP, brand, physical assets, people, that organisations need, not just to navigate times ahead, but to invest in new work and new ideas. There's no point strengthening a financial position if that compromises the core mission of the organisation. This can no longer be just about organisations being innovative and entrepreneurial in relation to identifying opportunities to generate more and more income and investment. It includes how government and how foundations explore all the financial mechanisms available to them to support the system of which they are part, and how and when they should use grants, loans, equity investment, create new structures such as endowments and future funds, which invest some of the capital into the more obviously commercial end of the sector, incentives for others to give, invest and do the same, not just to organisations but to other investors, legislative changes such as those being suggested at the moment in terms of tax regimes, but other related issues such as the legal structures that we use to operate, and being able to be more flexible around all those. Only when we have truly resilient artists and arts organisations have more control over how we create and distribute our work will we become agents for change rather than adapters to change, because that's what, to me, cultural leadership and cultural entrepreneurship is actually about. Just on something that's happening at the moment, the second stage of the New Models, New Money, believing that new models will drive new money, part of the next stage of the project is going to be a 2-year partnership between Foresters Community Finance here in Brisbane and Arts Queensland, looking in detail at all the financial social investment products that Foresters manages can be accessed by artists and cultural enterprises. What the barriers are to that, how AQ may need to adapt some of its ways of doing business to leverage such finance, and identifying what other cultural investment funds and products could be created in the future specific to our needs. Part of that will include expanding the microloan scheme that we have here in Queensland that I created with Brian Tucker a few years ago, which is a microloan scheme for individual artists and creative producers. We've delivered over $80,000 worth of loans in the last few years, 97% repayment rate. Microloans work within a particular context, and I know that some 2 or 3 of you sitting here are actually independent producers who've worked at Metro and have accessed those loans. So we'll be rolling that out. Just to quote finally, Clara Miller is the outgoing president of the Non-Profit Finance Fund in the US. And that's a community development financing institution like Foresters, but it delivers millions of dollars to the non-profit sector, including the arts, every year. She said a few years ago, non-profit self-sufficiency is in reality an ephemeral state in the tradition of Brigadoon and Camelot. All the goodwill, brainpower, capacity building, finger wagging, standard setting, evaluation, impact measures will eventually be undermined by the way we finance these enterprises. The financial system and support we have put in place is the worst enemy, not only of the improvements everybody is trying to make, but of the critical programs and services the system is meant to sustain. All efforts to improve the sector will be merely palliative without essential systemic reform of the way the rules of finance work. And if you want to check out their website and the current report, A Case for Change Capital in the Arts, and what they're doing with some arts organisations over there. Look, we've lots to learn from what's happening overseas, where they're having to go through this rapid change in a period of crisis. We should not have to do that. We should start now, because I believe we have the qualities of resilience and entrepreneurship within us, so let's use them.